In Genshin Impact's 2.6 Traveler Quest Act Requiem of the Echoing Depths, we gleaned more information about Khaenri'ah than known up until that point. For a quick recap, when exploring the ancient upside-down city with dainsleif, the traveler and Paimon came across a mysterious knight who, unlike the others, would not attack them. Instead, this knight assisted in their efforts to stop the abyss. The name of this knight is Halfdan, and he, along with the other Black Serpent Knights, was under dainsleif's command during the Cataclysm. This provided some major insight into dainsleif's history, affirming his title as the Twilight Sword and captain of the Royal Guard of Khaenri'ah. But for a kingdom as advanced as it was, it comes as no surprise that the Black Serpent Knights were not the only legion in Khaenri'ah responsible for protecting the kingdom, especially during the Cataclysm. Call me Kaeros, and this is the history, both fictional and non, of the Schwanenritter, Khaenri'ah's very own Light Brigade. Hats off to you if you caught my reference there. The Charge of the Light Brigade is an 1854 poem by Alfred Lloyd Tennyson. The poem details the Crimean War's Battle of Balaclava. The entirety of the poem is intense and powerful, but for now, we only need to focus on the second verse. Forward, the Light Brigade! Was there a man dismayed? Not though the soldier knew. Someone had blundered. There is naught to make reply. There's naught to reason why. There's but to do and die. Into the valley of death rode the 600. This verse needs minimal explanation in how it could relate to the Cataclysm, where there's a little Easter egg that had me in awe. It started out as somewhat of a joke, for the thought came to me suddenly that what if all the giant ruin machines are located in valleys? Because isn't the one in the jungles of Sumeru in a valley? The Ardravi Valley? It is indeed in the Ardravi Valley. And the one in the land of Upper Sitek? The Valley of Dari. Oh, and the one in the desert of Hadramaveth? Wounded Shin Valley. It could be a coincidence, or it could not be. We know from the Black Serpent Knights that they plunged blindly into the Cataclysm, and though their leader lives burdened by the regret of directing his friends to their deaths, Halfdan carries no resentment towards him. I could just be pulling at strings, but given the innumerable historical and literary connections embedded into the very foundations of Genshin Impact, an intentional reference isn't too far-fetched. So just who is Khaenri'ah's Light Brigade? With a name unlike their intimidating counterparts, the Schwanenritter were another section of Khaenri'ah forces. Their name is German and means Swan Knights. Swans are birds often associated with benevolence, beauty, and new beginnings. I'll elaborate shortly, but for now, just keep this in mind. It'll be important later. A hidden note in Sumeru can provide us with some more information on the matter at hand. The Morse code of the ruin guards located around the nation, once deciphered, reads as such: "We Schwanenritters have fought to the last one." The code uses a cipher known as a visionaire cipher, which is a Caesar cipher determined by a key. Confusing? Don't worry, a Caesar cipher is the most famous type of cipher. To use it, simply determine a number by which to shift the alphabet. Let's say 7. If we shift the alphabet by 7 places, A becomes H, so our new alphabet looks like this. In an example, a visionaire cipher is more complicated. In simplest terms, it works upon the same principles as a Caesar cipher, except instead of shifting by a number, letters are shifted according to a keyword, with each letter in the original word shifted according to the distance of the letters in the keyword from A. For example, our word is Tevat, our key is Farina, and we can use this handy square to help. For T, F corresponds to Y. For E, U corresponds to Y as well, and so on and so forth. So Tevat becomes this. Easy! In the case of the Ruin Guard's encrypted message in Sumeru, the key cipher is the name Anfortas. So just who is this Anfortas? Anfortas was a Knight Marshal of Khaenri'ah, and he took control for King Irmin, who had become indisposed during the Cataclysm. The true nature of the king's state during that time is still unknown. As a Schwanenritter and Knight Marshal, Anfortas took up the duty of protecting the people of Khaenri'ah during the Cataclysm, so he and other Schwanenritter took Khaenri'an citizens to Sumeru to protect them from the disaster. However, Sumeru too was awash with abyssal creatures, and many Khaenri'ans perished. Aside from the fact that he lost his eye in battle, Anfortas' fate is a mystery. Sumerians, now known as the Order of Skeptics, fought alongside Khaenri'ahs, namely Piero and dainsleif, and protected the harvest Dokkum, but there is no record of any Schwanenritter who also assisted in this defense. Until more information is disclosed about the nature of the cataclysm, as well as the nature of Khaenri'ah at the time, it seems like we find ourselves at a bit of a standstill when it comes to uncovering more about Anfortas. But what if I told you that wasn't the case? A German poet named Wolfram von Eschenbach wrote a poem titled Parzival, which is dated around the 13th century. Parzival is an alternate name for Percival, one of the Arthurian knights of the Round Table. For modern literacy, I would use the name Percival, but for reasons I will shortly elaborate upon, I will continue to use the Germanic Parzival. Parzival's claim to fame is that he embarked upon a quest to attain the Holy Grail, the cup known to be that which Christ drank from at the Last Supper. In Eschenbach's poem, Parzival does indeed obtain the Holy Grail, as well as the title of Grail King. Given that title, it follows that Grail King is a lineage, so just who possessed the Grail before Parzival? One of the most prominent figures in Arthurian legend, and one as old as the lands themselves, the Fisher King sits upon a solitary throne, protecting the Holy Grail until one worthy enough comes to claim it. In Eschenbach's Parzival, the name of the Fisher King is Anfortas. But the version of the Fisher King in Arthurian mythos is not the one I want to study here as it pertains to Genshin Impact. Rather, there is another author whose Fisher King fits the figure of Anfortas much better. His name? T.S. Eliot. In his renowned poem The Wasteland, T.S. Eliot includes the Fisher King without ever explicitly mentioning him by name. Rather, in Eliot's illustration of post-war England, the Fisher King is the country itself, beaten and ravaged, waiting for the clouds to part so glory may befall his lands once again. The Wasteland does not necessarily conclude with a harbinger of hope, but rather the death of the Fisher King. For as long as he reigns, England can never progress from its current ruin. This is because Eliot's Fisher King represents the olden ideals of England, every doctrine that restrained the country from evolving into modernity. With the death of the Fisher King, history is preserved, but does not remain as a barring force which prevents the nation from welcoming the future. So, what does this mean for Khaenri'ah? In short,
no need to revive the homeland.
If Anfortas resembles Eliot's Fisher King, then we could presume that he likely passed in battle. But he, in saving Khaenri'ahs from the cataclysm, leaves behind a legacy from which the nation can grow again. Now do you see the swan imagery? Perhaps then Halfdan was right. Khaenri'ah didn't fall, since they're still here. I'm exercising self-restraint here, for there are many references hidden in the Wasteland that could correspond to the lore of Genshin Impact, from the fortune-teller Madame Sosostris and her warning to fear death by water, which could correlate to Mona's character, or the prophecy which foretold the flooding of Fontaine, or the seer Tiresias, who has lived countless lives and could perhaps represent a figure like Istaroth, especially if we take her to be the shop owner from the in-game book Heart's Desire. Of course, this is all theory, speculation, and me attempting to connect my favorite media and works of literature to one another. But speaking of Heart's Desire, there's another character I have yet to mention, one known for his relationship to the blue-eyed spear witch, and of course another who took his name as an alibi and rescued Karl Ingol during the siege of Poisson. The first hailed from Mondstadt, the second from Fontaine, their shared name a reference to, and the same as that of, a 19th century opera. This opera drew inspiration from Arthurian legend, and specifically Eschenbach's poem. The opera's name, derived from the Persian Parse or Parsifal, is Parsifal. Its composer, Richard Wagner. If Parsifal is the seeker of the Holy Grail, and the Fisher King its keeper, then what is Genshin Impact's Holy Grail? For Mondstadt's Parsifal, it may be the wine he sought in Heart's Desire. For Parsifal de Fontaine, it could be a larger motive she was privy to whilst working in Poisson. Or it could be what the members of the Narcissenkreuz Ordo have sought. The world formula. Or perhaps it is what the Holy Blade of Narcissenkreuz represents. A will, something beyond the dream. A golden-haired outlander, if you will. But that's all for me today. Links and sources will be in the description box below, so you can take up the helm of further research if so inspired. As always, thank you so much for listening, and you can call me Kairos.